Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our online event, Finish Your Thesis. I am very delighted that you have all joined us for our discussion. My name is Liviu. I am an international student ambassador from Romania, and I will be moderating this event on behalf of the international student ambassadors of the University of Tartu. So for those of you who don't know about ISA, the International Student Ambassadors, we are a volunteer-based program which is comprised of international degree-seeking students who are studying at UT and who want to help prospective students to get to know the university better, as well as lifestyle in Tartu. We also answer questions and we share real experiences about living and studying in Tartu. We organize events online and offline, and we do a lot of other fun stuff. So our mission overall is to make sure that students feel comfortable during their stay in Tartu, and that we make the best out of everyone's studies and overall experiences in Estonia. So obviously, among all these things, writing your thesis is a key part of one's studies at the University of Tartu. And in a way, it does represent the grand finale of someone's degree, which means that if we're going to end our degree, we should do it in style, which means that we need to write down a great thesis. So many of you who are watching us right now are currently writing your thesis or planning to write your thesis or are close to finishing it. But no matter the stage you're in right now, rest assured that we want to help you with proper tools and proper people to consult with. And one of these people is Roger Yallop, who is our guest for today. So Roger Yallop has recently been awarded a 2-year postdoctoral grant to research academic writing pedagogy at The Ohio State University as a research fellow at the Center for Academic Writing at Tartu University. The project will further the work described in his PhD thesis, where he designed a pedagogical framework to support the long-term English writing skills of university students based at Estonian institutions. So throughout his PhD studies, Roger contributed to the teaching and development of academic writing courses at the University of Tartu. And before embarking on his PhD, he had worked as an EFL, which means an EFL lecturer, which is a lecturer in English as a foreign language in countries like Libya, Estonia, Finland, and Turkey. And after obtaining his PhD, Roger worked as an academic writing lecturer at Coventry University in the UK. I would like, before going further, I would like to let our viewers know that you may ask your questions in the Q&A section of this webinar. Please ask any questions if you have for Roger, and Roger will answer later. Yeah, without further ado, Roger, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction. First of all, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see my screen. Can you? In a minute.
Yes.
Okay, do you have the presenter view or just the ordinary view here?
Oh, we're seeing the whole view. Of
the whole view here.
Yes, it's
oh, never mind, I'm not going to worry about the technical. You can have the whole view. I'm not going to worry about this too much. I don't understand why that's working this way, but never mind. Okay, wait a second, I'll try this again then. Sorry, just a second, I'll try to get a better view here. Hang a sec, try this again, apologies. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have the presenter view here?
Yes, the presentation.
Okay, never mind. Okay, fine. Okay, I'll stick with this. Okay, anyway, hello everyone. My name is Roger Yallop, and I have just recently returned from the UK as an academic writing lecturer, and I've just rejoined Tartu University where I did my PhD. And I'm going to be working in with communicating science in the Center for Academic Writing. And I'm taking this presentation instead of Judah Legion, who was supposed to be taking this presentation because he has to give a presentation in the States at the moment. I've come back to Estonia, as rightly said, as I'm going to be doing a postdoc for 2 years in the States and here. So this is basically Jude's presentation. So most of the slides are courtesy of him. I would also like to thank the International Student Ambassadors and the International Marketing Office for organizing this webinar. So without further ado, I will start. Too many things here. So the purpose of this webinar is to talk about your writing and how to get your writing done. I know many of you are writing thesis, bachelor thesis, master's thesis, and basically we're going to be talking about the writing process. How do you write? And I'm not going to beat around the bush. Writing is very difficult. Also, how to motivate yourself. How do you keep yourself writing? How do you keep yourself writing and keep your motivation going? Now, I mean, basically, given our current situation, getting your writing done is easier said. Getting your writing done is easier said than done at the moment. So we're going to, okay, and also, yes. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is, what is academic writing? What does it mean to you? I mean, I'll just give you about half a minute to think about this. What is academic writing? Which we have to ask ourselves. You've got some prompts here. When asked about what is academic writing, during courses for the BA courses, MA students, and I've been teaching the PhD students as well, the basic idea is that academic writing is formal. It's talking about formal writing. But then this also goes down, what does the features of academic writing, what does formality actually mean? I mean, nowadays, does this mean that you have to use an impersonal style like the passive voice? Or is it okay to use I and we nowadays, which is where the shift is going? More on the hard sciences, generally prefers impersonal structures. More in the humanities, there's a shift towards that you are the author, so you can use I. You write about facts. Academic writing is factual. It is objective, not subjective. So therefore, you have to follow a strict structure, which is prescribed in the genre of writing you're doing. The grammar has to be correct and the language has to be correct. And so it's about facts, but it's using sources, argumentation, what we talk about criticality and critical thinking, to make an objective argument to convince your audience, the readers, that you know what you're writing about, and also so that so convince your writers that that you know what you're writing about, and also to give them information, to give them information and so on. If you talk about academic writing, maybe from a lecturer's perspective, we're talking about writing in a specific discipline. So if you come from political sciences, the discipline is going to be different from the humanities or the hard sciences. If you're writing about mathematics, for example, pure maths, your writing follows prescribed guidelines, which is given to you probably by if you're on your dissertation writing, you have to read the guidelines from your lecturers within your departments. And these guidelines are made or prescribed by the experts. There are different genres within the discipline. So here, which I come to, talking about maybe you're writing essays, reports. Here, we're talking about writing a baccalaureate thesis or a master's thesis. Talk about the specific features of academic writing, the formality, formal language, how you organize your thesis, for example, whether it follows, for example, what I call the IMRAD structure, introduction, maybe a literature review, methodology, results and discussion, how to use sources. And as I mentioned, we also got to talk about plagiarism, how to, well, obviously we do not want plagiarism, but how to avoid plagiarism. Now, this scares a lot of people from writing. I noticed this when I've been teaching at Coventry University. There's a strong emphasis on academic misconduct charges, students who are accidentally maybe copying sources without accrediting the ideas to the people, to the authors who wrote these sources. And that can be a bit like a straitjacket and constrain you from writing. But if you follow these procedures, you quote your sources, I don't think plagiarism is an issue. It should not be an issue at all. So if we talk about academic writing, much of it refers to do with style, specifically focus on the things we can see or easily evaluate, or perhaps view or assess based on our own understanding. So we're talking about formal language use, which makes you write, you're writing professional, which is honest and structured writing. We talk about using unemotional language so that you're being objective and subjective. Instead of sometimes when you're writing and you're passionate about a subject, it's very hard to put it's very easy that you want to put your emotions in, using sort of adverbs like surprisingly and so on. But here, try to keep a balanced view, try to keep an unbalanced language use, build up a sort of impartial argument. So the next questions we ask is, I mean, what a formal writer is professional, and the deeper we go, the more specific we get and the more difficult it becomes to find a clear, truthful answer. Because all these are different when we include three other elements which are very important to answering the questions of what is academic writing. So what you can do is you can view academic writing as a journey. Perhaps it is a journey. You have the start where you have to get started writing. And if you're writing the thesis, it's a very long journey where you get to the end, which will be your end product, which is the thesis you submit. So maybe this is a worthless answer, but academic writing is a journey. And this metaphor is relevant because it describes all the actors involved. You got yourself, you are writing. This is your journey of discovery and learning. Then the second actor is you got your text, which you are creating. It is constantly changing. It is constantly in flux. And this is the story of the content, the once upon a time story, which we hope that when you submit this will have a happily ever after ending. Then when you're writing for your readers, your audience. Always consider your audience. Who you want to move, or you want to attract, or you want to sway them with your argument, with your objective, professional, academic argument, your criticality and your emotional connection. And this is relevant to all the texts you write. Because academic writing, the purpose of academic writing is to create a response in your readers, your audience, who need to be convinced by your evidence. For example, if you're considering your audience here, is this the way you're supposed to write academically? I'll just give you a minute to read this cartoon. I hope you can see it clearly. And this is not obviously what you're trying to write. And this is quite, I remember going to a presentation a couple of years ago. I think it was in Germany actually, and the keynote speaker was this Leslie Sage, who's the chief editor of the magazine, the journal Nature, and he was saying that the purpose of writing is so that your audience can understand it. And if you talk about scientific articles, it should be aimed at about a third-year undergraduate level or to master's level, which is a lot of you at this stage now. And he said the worst manuscript they ever received were from 4 academics from Oxford and Cambridge University who wrote in such pompous language that nobody could understand. So the purpose of this cartoon is just to illustrate. Wait a second, I'll just put the laser pointer on here. It's just to illustrate that you should always consider your audience. So academic writing is not something, but it has properties. Academic writing has a clear purpose. You're writing for a clear purpose for an audience, and you always got to consider your audience. And academic writing has tone, a proper tone. So for example, I mean, if you talk about the purpose and when you're writing, why are you writing? This is something you should always ask yourself about. Maybe you're writing to contribute to your field of knowledge. Maybe for a relevant topic. I mean, I know the worst thing I've ever heard in presentations is when people give academic presentations and then the question is, what was the point of that? The so what factor, the why. What about your audience? Who are you writing for? Are you writing for scholars? Are you writing for your peers? Are you writing for other fellow researchers or scientists? I mean, obviously, if you're writing, for example, your thesis at baccalaureate and master's level, then you're writing for your instructors. But maybe if we're using the metaphor that writing is a journey, this may not be too helpful. Maybe so on. Also, tone. The tone should be unbiased. The tone should be formal, unemotional. Maybe in the hard sciences, but maybe it can be in some of the disciplines a little bit more informal or emotional. I mean, tone can change depending on the genre you're writing, the discipline you're writing in, and the structure. For example, in essays, reports, for example, the tone, if you're writing the literature review of your thesis, may not be about yourself. Very, very impersonal. This is what's happened in the literature. But then when you write the discussion, then you're trying to collate all the evidence which you presented in your results related to the literature, the theoretical background in your literature review, and the tone may slightly change here. So all of these different genres of writing come with their own conventions. For example, if you're writing essays, and I'm sure a lot of you have written essays before, you have your introduction, then you have your main body where you present the argument, and then your conclusion. Your thesis, a literature review, report, a summary. But what all these genres share in academic writing is purpose. They all have a purpose. You're writing for a reason. They all have an audience. You're writing for a specific audience, and your tone, your formality of language, and so forth. Because what also makes it challenging is because each time you write, you have to set out another route for that journey. For example, for an essay, how do you write an essay? How do you start writing the essay? How do you continue the process, the writing process, the journey to finish with your end product? Theses are harder. They are much longer writing assignments. So this is what you need to do. And they can be also discipline specific and they can be topic specific here. So it's challenging. Writing is challenging. It requires planning. And going back to the writing is a journey metaphor, which may be helpful or not, is how do you get from the starting point? How do you start writing? What strategies do you use for writing? Or are you a bit like me when you start with a long writing assignment like your thesis, you procrastinate? And I can tell you myself, I never have a clean a house when I've got a long writing assignment to do. So how do you motivate yourself? How do you plan? How do you get to the end point? And this is important. Planning is so important before you put pen to paper, or should we say finger to keyboard here. And just to give you an idea about the journey. Now, don't worry about too much about this model, but I'm not going to, the journey is a complex process. And if you're talking about the process of writing, this is a cognitive model which works in your mind. And there are three parts to this model here. First of all, you've got to consider what's called your task environment. I'm not going to go into this model too long, but just to give you an idea, this is your writing assignment. This would be your BA thesis or your MA thesis. And also your text so far, which is in constant flux, is constantly changing. The more you write, the more complex the issue becomes. Then you have your long-term memory. Here, you have your knowledge about the topic you're writing about, the knowledge of your audience and the structure of the BA thesis, the MA thesis, and so on. Then when you're writing, this is what's going on in your working memory. You're organizing, setting goals, putting pen to paper. So you've got these three competing processes all happening at once. This is just bloody difficult, to be honest. And if you're writing as English as a second language, it's even more complicated. So it is complex. It does require planning. But the good news is if you just take a deep breath, write a little bit every day, plan efficiently, which I'll talk about in detail in a minute, this process becomes less daunting. And actually, dare I say it, becomes enjoyable as well. So the journey metaphor is an ideal perspective for those who love writing. I mean, if I were to ask you, and just take a little thing, do you enjoy writing? Are you enjoying, if you're writing your thesis, are you actually enjoying your process of writing? If you're enjoying your process of writing, you'll find this metaphor helpful. I mean, or your emotional process to writing, or if you don't enjoy writing, what kind of baggage are you taking with you on this journey? What are you doing to get your writing done? I mean, if you are not enjoying writing, it's the only thing you care about is the final product. It's all you want is instrumental motivation. It's just that you want to get your thesis done, finished, and marked. Research says, we actually know from research, that the emotional dimension of writing can lead to joy and confidence. So basically, if you're not enjoying writing now, it's challenging. Try to get more motivated. Try to enjoy this process, this journey. I mean, here, research says that starting to write, for some of you, you may have writer's block. How do you get yourself to start writing? I mean, do you just stare at a blank piece of paper for 3 days? Here, there are activities you can get to release your writer's block. Some free writing activities, just write about anything. And most importantly, don't worry about the grammar, the language, and joining everything up so you write beautifully. Don't try to be a perfectionist. Perfectionism can often be a barrier to you writing. Just write. You can sort out the grammar, the language later. So, and that is, this picture here is if you've got a block and perfectionism, this is the worst. So, what I would suggest is don't look at the end point. It's daunting. Think about it as a journey. Try to enjoy this. I don't know if any of you has ever read this book. I mean, probably this is more my time, but The Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Motors, which is written by Robert Pirsig. Now, Robert Pirsig was actually a writing lecturer in American universities. And the purpose of this book is he's always trying to evaluate quality. What is quality? And he compares this to his teaching of academic writing. The whole purpose of the book is that it's not the destination which is important. It is the journey and what you learn throughout the journey. Because writing, you're writing to learn, to think. And if you enjoy it, then you should be able to free yourself up and write more. So, why do we write? This is the next question. Why should we write this task? What's the purpose? Why bother writing a thesis or a master's thesis? Well, some of the reasons we do this is about some of the reasons we do this is about skills development. You're developing your skills. We talk about criticality. We're talking about higher order thinking and so on. I mean, writing is also about learning. It is about thinking. And you could also view that writing is synonymous with thinking. For example, every time, if you're a writing diary, if you maybe to help you with your writing, you keep a diary. So that you can write your thoughts because there's a lot to think. The same idea as if you go shopping, you make a list, you write down a list so you can remember all the things you're supposed to buy when you go to the supermarket, for example. And then, of course, what's very important is your voice. Your voice is you. You are the author and your stories matter. And here your voice is how your tone, how formal you are, your style, and so forth here. So the most important is learning and thinking. And this is where there's a little bit of discrepancy. When we consider the topic of this webinar, get your writing done. This would imply that the most important thing about your thesis is just a completed product, the final product. It's not. The most important thing is learning, thinking. Writing itself is a great tool to develop thinking. We use writing to think about the product, which would be your BA thesis or master's thesis, the text itself. It should not look like a thinking text. It should look like a text which will allow me, the reader, to think. I mean, you as the author, you are thinking a lot when you're writing to create your text, but the end product is to get your readers to think about your topic, to inform them, to sway them, to educate them. If I'm reading your topic, your thesis, I don't want to be part of your thinking process. I want your writing to inspire me, to inspire my own thinking process. So basically, learning to figure how to write about the topic you're writing about and so forth here. So that's what's important here. So to get your writing done, this is important. And very important. Take your time to think before you write. This is planning. Then, when you have planned, write a lot. Free write. Like if you've got writer's block, for example, just write. Writing is revision as well. I mean, basically, as I'll explain a little bit later in this presentation, expert writers write a lot and revise a lot. Novice writers don't revise much at all. So it's all about revision, revision, and revision. Personally, if you talk about my own writing process, when I'm writing, because I write a lot of articles and chapters of books, I write a lot in the evening. I just write. I write about anything. Well, obviously connected with the topic, but I just let myself flow. I just write about the topic. It's a mess. It's a garbled mess at the end of the day. Then when I wake up in the morning, I make myself a strong cup of coffee, and then I edit my text for the first hour before I do any writing. I sort out all the thoughts I had last night and try to put them into coherent sentences and build up these coherent sentences into coherent paragraphs, and then build these paragraphs up into coherent sections. So if we talk about the writing process, and this is important, the writing process itself. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar of the writing process itself, but do you know your own unique writing process? How do you write? If we talk about this, you have your pre-writing process. This is, first of all, you've got to think about your audience. I always consider your audience. Who are you writing for? This is important. And this will also, why are you writing? What is the purpose of this writing? You should state this clearly in your introduction, 1 or 2 sentences. What is it? What do you expect to get out of this? Thinking. You're going to have to think a lot. You're going to have to discuss with your supervisor, with your peers. Writing is a social act, so do talk to people. You could set up reading groups, writing groups to support your own processes. You need to gather ideas. You need to read articles, books, and then you need to take notes. And you need a system, because as the writing gets more complex and your references build up to 10 references, 20 references, 30 references, you're going to forget the important quotes or the important ideas here. So you need a system to annotate. Writer's block, as I've been talking, pre-writing and outlining. This is your pre-writing process. After the pre-writing and the planning, and I can't stress this enough, don't put pen straight to paper or finger to keyboard. Think, plan. Maybe you like to make writing plans as well. Make a detailed plan. Then you get to the drafting process itself, where you start writing. Here you can start sequencing your ideas. You can organize your text into paragraph sections. You need to rethink and revise. You're thinking about how to support your choices, your audience and purpose. And for the revision process, it doesn't have to be a lonely experience. You can use a system called peer review. For example, you can get together in groups, small groups of your peers in your disciplines, and help each other with the writing. This is called peer review. and writing groups, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in this talk. And this is actually my research area, is how to facilitate writing groups. So at the end of this presentation or later, I'll be very happy to help you set up these groups to help you with the drafting process. This is basically the main writing process. Then we talk about, after this, then we go to you hand in your thesis to your supervisor. And basically you go through the editing process, tidying up your grammar, punctuation, making it all look nice. And then you publish this. So that's the writing process. Okay, so if we talk about this, I mean, if I ask you, would you consider yourself to be a novice writer or a professional writer? I would suspect a lot of you would say you're novice writers, but I would suspect that's not the case at all, or an intermediate writer. Okay, to explain what this means, writing research shows, and this is by using login tracks on professional writer and a novice writer. This is research done in Belgium by my two colleagues here. And what they do is they put two writers down together, and they basically monitor all the keystrokes they do. This is monitored and recorded. So, and they're sitting down and they're trying to find out, how do expert writers or professional writers write? How do novice writers write? And if I just show, don't worry about too much, but on this vertical axis, we're talking about characters here. Doesn't matter numbers, but it's in thousands. And this is time over here on this horizontal axis here. And you'll notice here, that these are the actual words which a professional writer writes, which is about here. But because of the editing and revision process, the actual words they actually submit is about a third of the actual words. So all of this is deleted. The delete button is your friend. And you see, during the revision process, they're going up and down, they're writing more words, they're revising, writing, revising, writing, revising, writing. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Writing is revision. It is all, the more you revise, the more professional your writing will be. And this is what professional writers do. If you look at novice writers, on the other hand, you see that they just write. And basically, there's very little revision. You just keep continuing in a straight line with your text in the journey. It's one-dimensional, doesn't go back at all. And you see the amount of words deleted is very small. And that, so basically what research shows is that novice writers, if you see these diagrams here, will hopefully revise more before writing and understand the importance of planning before writing. It is important for getting your writing done. This is the time aspect here. So if we talk about writing strategies here, research shows that expert writers plan their writing thoroughly. They reflect a lot. They reread and edit their text often. But the most important thing about writing is to write, and compile numerous drafts before completing your final draft. And you're going to discover this, or you have discovered this during your thesis writing here. I mean, don't start writing your thesis the day before the deadline. That's never going to work. That never ends happily. We want a happy ending to your journey in the once upon a time metaphor here. So to get your writing done, and we're going to have a look at the pre-writing, you need to really use all the stages of your writing. It's not here it's presented as a one-dimensional linear thing, but it is going backwards and forwards. And if you follow this process of pre-writing and you take good notes and so forth, then this would be the best deterrent against if you have any fear about plagiarism here. So this is the writing process here. So let's go back. And the purpose of this webinar is to get your writing done. And I think the most important thing here, we're talking about emotions and writing, is to try to get into a habit of making writing a habit. Set a little bit of time every day to finish a portion of your writing, the process, and try to enjoy your writing. Try to motivate yourself so you enjoy writing. If you're struggling with the motivation, then you can use other tactics like promise yourself something nice, a treat after you write a certain section of your thesis and so on. So you schedule your writing, and make sure you've got protected time and space where you will not get disturbed. So then, this leads back to how to get your writing done, how you're planning your writing, your pre-writing, and structuring your writing. And based on the topics which I've covered so far, the most essential components of getting your writing done is the planning, the pre-writing phase. Think about the journey you want to take the readers on. If you get the planning right, you'll find that the writing process, your writing process will go smoothly. It'd be so much easier. But what does planning actually mean? It can mean anything. It could mean reading articles, for example, just thinking about ideas, thinking about the structure, absolute discussion with your supervisor, with your peers about your topic, how you're going to structure your story, and so on. So you also got to find your purpose. Why are you writing? What is the purpose for writing? Are you actually writing to get an A or grade? And if so, how are you going to get the aid? Are you writing it because you want to learn something? Or are you just writing it because you have to? All of these different initiators or motivating factors makes a huge difference in the way you engage with the text. I mean, when you're writing, do you want to influence and persuade others? Do you want to change the world with what you're writing, which is nothing wrong with this? Or are you just writing to improve your skills or language? So get to know what is the purpose of your writing and know your audience. Who are you writing for and why are you writing this text? So, as mentioned before, just to recap here, there are strategies to get us started. And I'm going to talk about some tools in a minute, some useful tools you can use to help you. But if you suffer from writing blocks, then there are strategies. I mean, this is difficult to get over. I mean, writing blocks are often caused by motivation. You've decided that you need to write the day and you can find every excuse to procrastinate. Do not procrastinate. Try free writing, for example. Just write about anything. Don't worry. Don't be blocked by perfectionism. If you're worried that it all has to be perfect, don't. Practice writing. Write a lot. You can brainstorm ideas, generate ideas. Make writing plans. I mean, by writing plans, I'll talk about this in a minute, and so on. Another very important thing, which may help some of you, is make sure you set yourself goals. And by goals, we're talking about short-term goals and long-term goals, but be realistic. I mean, by this, by setting goals, and a good way to do this is by keeping, for example, a writing diary. You can keep a writing diary. You can just jot down your thoughts. You can jot down what you want to achieve by the end of the day, by the end of the week, by the end of the month. But think about what you wish to achieve by the end of your writing day, by the end of the week. Make sure that your goals are realistic. And what can be very good is find a peers, find one of your course mates, your mates, anyone, a friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, and be accountable. An accountable peers. Say that by the end of the week, I'm going to do this. Keep track. And if you haven't achieved this by the end of the week, then try to justify why you didn't or improve later. Maybe you need to revisit your goals and make them more realistic. Maybe you procrastinated more, but do make goals, keep them, record them, write them down in your diary, and then analyze did you achieve your goals or not? Analyze why you achieved them or didn't. And if you're talking about goals, you could be talking about how much today I'm going to write 200 words if you want to quantify it. I don't think writing can be quantified. I don't quantify my writing. It's about ideas. Sometimes you'll write nothing, but you get some good ideas and make some notes. Maybe talk about how many paragraphs you're going to write and so on. And obviously the long-term goal is to submit a well-crafted BA thesis or MA thesis. So, and research, going back to this slide here, and research shows in all the academic writing models is that writers who have goals succeed much more than writers who have sketchy goals, concrete goals. It is a very helpful tool here. So, I can't stress enough, make writing plans, keep a writing diary. And that's why I'll just give you about a minute to think. I've been talking a lot, so I need a drink of water quickly. Think about, how do you formulate and revise your writing goals and writing plans, if you make any writing plans? And do you keep a writing diary? By writing diary, it could be anything, notes, annotation. And if you don't, do you think it could be helpful to keep one? Okay, I'll leave that to you to think about. So we're talking about how to get your writing done. And what we've been speaking about is planning, which I've been banging on about. Is very important. And motivation, the emotions, writing the emotion goes together. Try to get you motivated. I mean, know why you are writing. If your goal is just instrumental motivation to finish your thesis and get an A, then fine, work for this. But as I can stress enough, try to, if you don't enjoy the writing process, try to enjoy it a little bit more. I'm not going to say that I can change you or persuade you to love writing by the end of this webinar, but go with an open mind. But understanding the writing situation here, we have the context. The context is very important, your cultural and social cultural context. The country you're writing in, the discipline you're writing in, the genre you're writing in, and context is very important. You've got your social context as well. And then you've got your physical context. Here you've got all your, the physical context is about your writers, who are writing, your documents, the readers, and so on. And what I can say is that writing does not have to be a lonely task. You're not by yourself writing by yourself with no one to talk to. I mean, writing is a social act. I mean, you can think of it like writing as a dialogue. It is a dialogue. It's a dialogue with your audience, your readers, like a conversation. A conversation is a dialogue between two or more interlocutors, for example. But writing is the same. You're having a dialogue with your readers. The only difference about writing, which may make it more difficult in the face-to-face conversation, is you don't have paralinguistic cues, for example, and often the speakers can clarify understanding if they misunderstand. When you're writing, you have to be concise. You have to think about the interpretation, because at the end of the day, when you're writing, you have your thoughts. You have your intended meanings, which you write in the paragraph, the purpose you write, your intention of meaning, which you're trying to convey to your audience. Now, the problem is, does your audience or does the reader understand what you are trying to mean the same way as what you intend it to mean, if you know what I mean? But writing, which is something, but writing is a social act. It's a dialogue between you, and I'll go back to the three journeys, in the journeys between you, the writer, the text, and the audience. So, and there are ways, which I'll talk about in a minute, how you can get the social context, which we have been doing at ComSci. There are sessions, which I'll talk about in a minute, like Write With Me, where we provide with our PhD students protected time and space. We have a time for 2 hours, for example, where you just get your writing done. And also there are writing groups, which I explain here. So just to tell you, how do you get your writing done? If we talk about writing as a social act, you should write with others. As I said, writing is social. It does not have to be a lonely experience. And particularly as we're just coming out of a pandemic, where we've been isolated for a couple of years, I mean, missing the face-to-face contact. I mean, what you can do is engage with others about your writing. So talk to your, I mean, form like a writing groups or study groups with your peers. If you're writing dissertation, same discipline, you write in different topics, of course, but use each other emotionally to encourage and motivate each other. Make each other accountable for your production. Make agreements with each other, as I was talking earlier, about your goals, that by the end of the week, I'm going to get this done. By the end of the month, I'm going to finish my methodology section. And you can also set up writing groups where you can, or not writing groups, but also informally read each other's texts, give each other advice, give feedback to each other, help each other, have a dialogue, use each other to bounce ideas off, write together, discuss your text. All of these things you can do yourself and set up. But at ComSci, Tartu University will be very happy to help you with these activities. So this is an example from PhD students. This is Judah, and this is an example of shut up and write session here. And what we do is we schedule, for example, a whole day session. People sign up, you're accountable, and basically you shut up and write. It goes with 1 hour writing session and then a 10-minute break. So to give you an example of how this happens, the idea of shut up and write is you have protected time and space. So for example, we have a day like Wednesday. It could be half day, it could be a full day. Then you find, or you can organize this amongst yourselves and find a suited time between yourselves. You can meet on Zoom, you can meet on MS Teams or whatever video conferencing app, or you can meet face to face. And the idea is you just shut up and write. No procrastination. The other way we do this is we also, which I haven't mentioned here, we have writing retreats where we go away for 3 days and just give protected time and space where you don't need to worry about anything about cleaning, cooking, no excuses not to write, just fully focused on writing. If you have problems writing and you need a more structured approach, then I don't know if any of you have used the Pomodoro technique before. But this is a technique, it might sound a little bit strange, where you have a timer. And the timer basically goes off every 25 minutes. So basically the idea is that you work, you pick a task for 25 minutes, then the timer goes off after 25 minutes, then you have a short 5-minute break, and then you repeat this cycle, for example, for 4 what they call Pomodoros, then take a longer 15 to 30-minute break. But of course, this is not set in stone. It doesn't have to be a 25-minute session. You can make it half an hour, 45 minutes and adapt it. But this structured approach may help some of you who may be less motivated to write to become more motivated to write. That's the idea of writing together as well. Another area you could consider, and this is an area I'd be very happy to facilitate at a later date. And if you're interested, you can give your names to the organizers. Something called writing groups, which is, as I said earlier, this is my research area. And the idea here is that you form small groups, preferably, probably if you're writing your, for example, a master's dissertation in political sciences, maybe there's 3, 4, could be just 2 of you are interested. You form a small group. And you go, and you, of course, you make your long-term goals is that you're going to support each other in the writing process, both emotionally and practically, to have a well-crafted dissertation. And what you can do, the way this works, is that you can share plans or sections of your whole draft, your thesis, just small portions over a period of time, I'll demonstrate in a minute, with each other for feedback. And just to give you an idea of writing groups, there's so much research on how useful it is for many aspects of your writing process, motivation aspects, practical aspects, and so on. That, for example, it was useful by this quote in that it forced me to think about my writing, confront my demons about writing, and actually do some writing. And this is actually talking about master's writing, thesis writer or dissertation writer for master's students. So how does a writing group work? Well, I'll give you a very short demonstration, a very short idea of how it could work. It doesn't have to be formal, but it could be formal. But let's say that there's 4 of you in political science, and I'll just call you Anne, Bob, Claire, and Dave, just for simplicity here. The idea is that you submit your draft. So maybe you're writing your introduction. Let's say it's a thesis. Maybe it's an intro, maybe you're following the INRAD structure, maybe not. Introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So in the first cycle of feedback, and this whole cycle will take about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever, you write your introduction, 1 or 2 pages. Then you submit your draft to your peers. So Anne would write an introduction and then submit this to Bob, Claire, and Dave. Similarly, Bob would write an introduction and submit this for Anne, Claire, and Dave for review. Then in the next stage, in the writing group, Anne would give feedback to Bob, Claire, and Dave's introduction and receive feedback on her introduction from Bob, Claire, and Dave. It doesn't have to be an introduction, it could be any section of the text. And then after giving feedback, you can get together and have a meeting, a group meeting, to discuss each other's texts and feedback comments and use our writing as a social act. Does this help you in the journey from the start to the finish? Then after you receive the feedback, then you look at the feedback and then you revise your draft according to instruction and you improve your draft. And basically you repeat this process over, for example, 3 months. We do this on the PhD courses, on the doctoral courses over 3 months for writing, for example, scientific articles. And it's a highly effective method. And as I said, if anyone is interested in this, informing the writing group, then please contact me. I will be more than happy to facilitate with the startup. We're also talking about these shut up and write sessions. These can be useful as well. So yes. So now we get to tools. What tools do you use for getting? I mean, most of the tools you can use software packages to help you write it are about focusing, getting yourself focused on writing. And a lot of it is about language itself, about the grammar. I mean, you can use thesaurus and so on here. So for example, for some tools you can use, self-control is a tool to stop you being distracted. If you like if you're writing and you get easily distracted, you want to look at the internet, check your email, or find 100 other things which are more interesting than what you're writing about, then download this. What it will do, it will block all the apps on the computer that distract you. So you have just your screen and you writing. Very good. If some of you are worried about grammar and language, I think some of you probably heard of Grammarly. I think it might be available at Tartu University. I'm not sure. I just got here, so I'm not so sure. And Trinker, they're all about language related issues. Now, personally, I don't like Grammarly. I do not like Trinker because, as I said earlier, an important part of writing is the planning process. And a big block to writing is perfectionism. So when you're writing, it highlights all your mistakes as you're writing. And that can be a bit of an issue. It can be a block for your creating ideas and getting your writing to flow, trying to get your sentences to link together, to make a paragraph, and a paragraph with the main idea, and so on. But they can also be useful as well, very useful. But I mean, like any tools, you have to use them wisely. Now, if we talk about some very useful tools you can use here, maybe if we talk about Mendeley and Sotero, which are reference management systems, which are very, I mean, they are basically, when you're writing, they help you keep a systematic list of all the references you're using, all your sources. And as I said, when you only got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sources, then it's very easy to annotate these by hand and keep a clear system. But when you're building up your sources, 20 sources, 30 sources, 40 sources, if you go on, also if you're going to go on from a baccalaureate to a master's where you're building up the sources, or if you're thinking of going on from your master's to do a PhD, for example, for the PhD, I think I must have had hundreds and hundreds of references. You do need a system to keep control of this. Otherwise, it just becomes overwhelming. As I said, writing is a journey. It's from start to finish, but it's the process. You're talking about writing, writing to learn, writing to think, and so forth. And it should be an enjoyable process. The journey should be enjoyable, and it is, provided that you're systematic. Personally, I use Sotero. and I found it incredibly helpful. Not only does it keep your sources, it also, you can also annotate your notes with this. So if you have the PDFs, you can make your own notes and put your ideas. I believe Notion I haven't used. These are notes I've used from Judah. And there's also Ultimate. These are note-taking apps, note-taking tools. And if you think about it, note-taking is a form of writing, and writing is a form of thinking. So these are systematic tools that you can explore. You can find these on the web to help you keep track of your writing here. Now, we come to plagiarism. The simple answer is don't do it. Yes, but I mean, the thing is that you hear these horror stories, plagiarism, students are scared, you talk about plagiarism, self-plagiarism, and so on. I mean, sometimes maybe you accidentally, maybe you used some sources and you didn't use software properly, you had a wonderful source and a wonderful quote, which you really want to use in your thesis, and you've forgotten where the source is. I mean, it's happened to me countless of times writing articles and PhD. It's really frustrating. I have spent days and days and days trying to find, because I had the beautiful quote which succinctly sums all the ideas up in the section which I wanted to write about. But you can't just use these ideas, you've got to use the source. So basically, if you're worried about it, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if you listen to everything I said earlier, that's designed to avoid avoid plagiarism, because you're systematic and organizing. But if you're worried, then there are systems. Urkund, which I believe is at Tartu University, is a plagiarism software. Your supervisor should have it. And if you're worried, then you can ask your supervisor to put your dissertation through this software, and it will highlight if you have been using sources without references. If you're very worried about plagiarism, send your notes to me or Judah, and we can get it scanned. I mean, personally, I've been using, I don't know if any of you, I've been using Turnitin at Coventry, where the students can actually, bachelor's and master's students can submit their own text online and they can do their own plagiarism source. But basically, plagiarism, of course, is unethical to steal other people's ideas or other authors' ideas, researchers, without fully crediting them for these ideas. So, if we talk about ideas, now these notes were for writing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we're just coming out of this, but it's been a very lonely situation. And of course, with the events at the moment, it's just horrendous. But somehow you just got to keep yourself. So here's some ideas. If you can't start, write an outline or contents instead. Make bullet points. Write the exact section, the easiest section for now. You don't have to start with the introduction. I mean, if you're in sciences, maybe the methodology section is the easiest. I mean, methodology is like a set of instructions. So maybe you just write what you did, basically, then write the introduction, then write the results. It depends on the structure of your thesis here. Write what is in your mind, even if just in note form. You can keep a writing diary as well, as I was saying before. You know, just jot down your thoughts. I mean, it's like moving as well. Here's another metaphor. Writing a thesis is like moving home. Utterly chaotic and disorganized and everything all over the place. You don't think it's all going to come together, but amazingly, come by the deadline when you have to move house to hand in your thesis, it's all ready, beautiful, and perfect. Be kind to yourself. Take your emotional temperature as well. I mean, writing might not actually be your main priority right now. And as I said, you might think of it as a marathon as well, not as a sprint. And embrace whatever makes you feel happy at the moment. You know, we're talking about the motivational side. If you force yourself to write, you don't want to write. Your motivation will wane. And that's not helpful. And then you're just hate writing, and it's a vicious circle. So don't do that. Take a breath, take your emotional temperature, do things you like. And as I said, also if we can't start here, use each other, form writing groups or come write with me. And when I talk about writing groups or reading circles, it doesn't have to be formal, as I specified earlier. It could just be two of you just motivating each other to get through this. Competing priorities here. Okay, and as I said, schedule the writing time, even if it's only 15 minutes a day. And that's especially good for writing block. Just sit down for 15 minutes, maybe first thing in the morning. Get your cup of tea or cup of coffee, sit down and just write for 15 minutes. You don't even have to write about your thesis if you're really blocking, just write about something. Eliminate all your non-essential activities. And no, that does not mean that you're going to have to completely spring clean your home or apartment because you don't want to write. No. Break down writing into achievable short writing blocks. And this is what I spoke about earlier. Set yourself goals, realistic goals, short-term goals. Yes. I'm motivated again. This happens, as I said, use writing as a social act, writing groups, write as a team, peer review each other's work. Even if your work does not seem to be so important at the moment, remember it is important. That's why you started it. Focus on where you feel you can make a difference and so on. Check in with each other, hold yourself attractive. For distractions, turn off your email, Twitter, phone, whatever. Just turn it all off. Just focus on writing. Limit your news, social media time in general. This will limit the amount of underlying noise that might distract you. And then find protected time and space, somewhere very quiet and comfortable where you can write. So, for your writing, keep it practical. Find your purpose, plan your content. Writing is planning. When we talk about writing, it's not just putting pen to paper or finger to keyboard. It's not just the writing, it's all the planning process. Enter your dialogue, plan time for writing, share writing with others. Don't be a perfectionist, write to learn freely. And remember, writing is a journey. It's a journey, and you as the author, the text which meets your audience, and try most of all to enjoy the journey of writing as a process. And that's it. I think that is all I have to say. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll take questions.
Thank you so much, Roger, for your presentation. It's been a really educating discussion about the thesis, and I personally I do relate with a lot of the points that you said during the presentations, and I think it's been really helpful for the people who are listening. Actually, if I can, how do I say? If you don't mind, I have a question from. I'd like to address you a question from myself,
Sure.
because I'm also in the process of writing my thesis. So for instance, in my case, I feel like I have been procrastinating quite a lot recently, and I have my thesis that's half done already. And now here's the procrastination, just before the finish line. And I feel that I'm procrastinating. I'm still having some time. How can I save the situation in order to get the writing done on time and get it qualitatively great?
Okay, well, first of all, Livil, what exact stage are you at with your thesis writing? Where are you? You said you're close to the finish line, are you?
Well, right now I'm, let's say, halfway, a bit over halfway.
Okay, and when's your deadline?
Well, in May. Would be like the final deadline, but all the parts should be done in April. Okay,
well, the first thing is, I don't know. First of all, you've got to really understand your writing process. You're saying that procrastination is what is distracting you? Like me, I keep saying that my house is spotless when I have to write.
I think same in my case.
Okay, but you really got to try and get yourself motivated. How often? Get writing as a habit. Write every day. Doesn't have to be for a long period, 50 minutes or half an hour. Are you using your peers as well, your colleagues? Are you writing in a sort of group or pairs and trying to motivate each other? Get yourself goals, write them down, talk. You can have a buddy. You can use a buddy system. Go to someone, doesn't even have to be a peer, anyone, a good friend or whatever, and write down, I'm going to do this by the end of the week, and get your person to really grill you and make sure your buddy, make sure that is trying to push you to make sure that you achieve your goals. But basically, you got to get started. You got to write every day. Slow and steady wins the race. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. Thank you so much, and I'll take this this advice to heart. Also related to motivation, we have a question from one of our viewers. They say, I find that when writing motivation can be flaky, and there are habits that are keeping me getting up in the morning and writing. What do you think? I think the person is trying to
Sorry, could you just paraphrase this for me again? I didn't quite
so
get that.
okay, so I guess the person is trying to say that the person has problems with writing motivations, and they have habits that keeps them, let's say, get up in the morning late or not doing their work on time.
Okay, well, I mean, this is motivation. I think it's pretty similar, the answer to what I just said to you, Little. You know, you just basically, I mean, if your motivation is waning, then you've got to understand yourself. I mean, we go down, what is the purpose? You've got to remind yourself, why are you writing? What is the purpose of your writing? Because, I mean, you spent so much, you've got to remember that you spent so much effort, time you've expended on writing a bachelor's or master's thesis. So somehow you just got to get out this habit. And I think the answer will just have to be pretty similar. You've got to find out what is the root cause. Why you're not enjoying the writing? What is stopping you from getting up in the morning, basically staying in bed because I just can't face going to my computer and writing? You've got to think about, this is what I said, writing is a social act. Write as a group. It doesn't have to be a very lonely experience. It usually is. And when you get to PhD level, especially in the humanities like me, you often find that you're kind of writing to yourself for a whole month. But you just got to change your habits, basically. Talk to people, chat. Speaking is good. And just try to, as I said to you, make short-term goals, long-term goals which are realistic. And just write. Maybe, as I said, don't even write about your thesis. Just get in the habit of writing something every day, even 5 minutes or a sentence, but just something. And hopefully over time, and then remind yourself, when is the deadline? And don't get panicked or spooked that it's coming sooner and sooner, but just remind yourself about what you're going to do when you finish your thesis. Promise yourself to something nice at the end. If you like ice cream, then get yourself a nice ice cream at the end of the day, or go to the pub and have a beer on the Friday evening or whatever as a reward. Just set yourself sort of rewards and motivational techniques here.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, when you plan your writing and give yourself deadlines and cannot meet them, how do you go about it?
Well, then this comes down to, you give yourself deadlines. You have to ask yourself, have you set yourself realistic deadlines? I mean, sometimes it could be unrealistic. You may say to yourself, I mean, maybe you're saying like, tell you what, I'm going to write half my dissertation in a week. And that is really unrealistic, isn't it? So what you have to do is that at the end of the week, when you set yourself your deadlines or your tasks, and you haven't achieved them, hopefully you got someone who's your accountable buddy, so to speak. But you chat about this, you work out, why did I not achieve my deadlines? What were the root causes? Was it because my deadlines were unrealistic? Or was it because my motivation was low? And as you said, I didn't want, I found it hard to get up out of bed to start writing because I really can't face it. Were there other distractions? But I mean, and then you have to think for the next week, is you revise your goals accordingly for the following week, make them realistic. And if there are other factors that you've been procrastinating, which is stopping you with the emotion of writing, then you've basically just got to take a deep breath. But most importantly, don't beat yourself up about it. It happens.
Okay. Thank you. We have another question here. It says, what if I started hating about what I write about? The reason to hate is I'm no longer interested in my research question. I could have formulated better, but it is too late. So The person is asking about hating the topic.
Right. We're all on the question of motivation now. Okay.
I guess this time it's a bit different, because I think there's one thing to be unmotivated to write something and another thing to literally hate your topic.
If you hate your topic, I don't know what to say about that. That's just really unfortunate and sad. I mean, normally I would hope that you'll be passionate on your topic. That's the motivation. You're writing about it because you love your topic. If you hate your topic, then all I can say, talking off the record, is first of all, take a deep breath, relax, and then try to think about the motivation from extrinsic or instrumental motivation point of view. I'm going to assume writing's not going to be fun. You don't like the topic. Okay, let's just take that as a given. However, think about why are you doing your baccalaureate or master's degree, and what would you get out of it when you finish it? So think about the end product. Think about finishing. And then, you know, and think about what you're going to get out of this. Maybe you get a great job, or you want to do something else, and you'd be out of the topic. And it's too late to change. I'm assuming that you're getting quite close to the end of your writing product. So what I would say is try to put a shield around yourself almost, and just try to, an emotional shield, and just get it done. We all do things we hate sometimes, things we don't like in life. You just got to just put it into your brain set that, right, I'm going to get this done. I'm not enjoying it, but at the end of it, it's going to be great because I'm going to have a master's degree, which I can do so much with. That's about all I can say about that. I can't see how I can change your opinion that you're going to love your topic, but you could start to enjoy the writing process. I mean, writing is a different discipline to the topic. So you might enjoy the actual process of writing, the journey of writing. You might enjoy to see how you put sentences together to construct paragraphs, to get a critical argument, how the sections go together. There's a bit of beauty and art in that, which might inspire you.
Okay, thank you. Another question from our viewers: how do I find the balance between writing an emotionless, boring text and a thriller? I guess thriller refers to maybe a text like the thesis, like the thrilling experience of writing a text.
Okay, well, okay, let's say the emotionless reading of a text. Okay, I assume here, I don't know what discipline this person is from, but a lot of academic texts, yes, can be emotionless, can be a little bit dry, but I'm hoping that as you like the topic, you can see beyond the emotionless and look at it from an argument. Look at it from a critical thinking perspective. What is the argumentation here? What is the author trying to say, which is relevant to my topic? I mean, I'm assuming you talk about reading someone else's text, an author's text, and using that knowledge for writing your thesis. Think about what is important about this text. How think about what, I mean, it all goes down. What is the purpose of writing? What is your purpose of writing? Your purpose of writing is to learn from other researchers and other texts, to learn from that argumentation. Think about, try to change your attitude from, it's not dry and emotionless, it is an argument, and it's a well-written argument. And do you agree? Look at it from a critique the article. I mean, when people submit their articles, when they're published in reviews, scientific journals, whatever, doesn't mean it's a perfect article. I mean, the whole point is writing is a dialogue between the writer and the readers. You are a reader in this concept, reading someone else's thinking, which is making you think, which is what I've been trying to say throughout this webinar, and try to think about and whether this article is relevant to your thesis, and if it is, what aspects of this article is relevant. This is why you have annotation tools, etc. Write down what is good and get excited about trying to contribute to the body of knowledge in your field. You know, how is this going to contribute to my thesis? How is this argumentation here exciting? Or maybe it's a methodology you're using. Very good to use. I think there was a question I just scanned in the chat about, I'm struggling with the methodology. Reading articles about methodology. I mean, when you're reading a scientific paper, for example, a chapter of a book, you're not going to read the whole article and use everything in an article. There'll be certain, I mean, if you're talking about this, you read the abstract first. The abstract will give you an idea of whether it's interesting or not and whether it's relevant. Then You might read the introduction, which gives you a flavor of what this article is about and how it's going to be contributing to the body of knowledge. Then you have the theoretical framework or literature review is quite a standard phrase, where this is a very good source of information for sources, references, who is arguing for my case and who is arguing against my case, what are the researchers here. And this gives a good, you might be looking at it from the methodology point of view, the methodology, which is just like, I kind of think of it like cooking. It's a recipe, isn't it? The methodology section, which you should be able to pass on to another researcher who should be able to repeat the experimentation exactly the same, should be replicable and credible. But you might be using this for your own methodology. It's very good. You know, you've got a methodology. I don't know if it's quantitative research dealing with numbers, qualitative research, so maybe more interview techniques and so on, maybe ethnographic research, or maybe you're going into inferential statistics, whatever. But I mean, you're using this here, then you're looking at the results. And you may be looking at whether if you're looking at articles, whether you're going to present your results separately from your discussion or mix them up. Results are more objective. Methodology is just the process. This is what happened, is factual. Results are often expressed objectively. And when I did this, this is what we got. Bomb, 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 bomb. And from this evidence and the literature review, we got this. So basically try to look at the reading from why are you reading this article? It's like same as writing. What is the purpose of reading this article? How is it going to help me for the purpose of my writing?
Thank you. We have a question here from a law student who says they have a tendency to write too much. Any advice on that?
I have the same problem. There's nothing wrong with writing too much, but here we're talking about the word limit. I mean, you have strict word limits. I mean, you have, I don't know, thesis, you have a certain number of words, 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, whatever. Writing too much, I find is okay, because writing is a process and it's the editing phase now. And that means that if you've written too much, and if we talk about academic writing and research thing, we're talking about information it's condensed information. You have to condense all your ideas down to a short paragraph. So here we're talking about aspects you need to look at is paraphrasing. Have you paraphrased succinctly? Have you managed to reduce the word counts? Are you using direct quotations a lot? That always eats up the words. Or if you are using direct quotations, can you condense these to the ideas of the author? Of course, you're referencing the ideas because we talked about plagiarism. The other thing is you need to look through all your different sections and think about, you've got to ask yourself this, and this is where writing groups are good, or peers, where you get people to review. What information is essential? What information is nice to know? And what information is not essential? Now, if you think about, if you're writing a thesis, you start with, you probably have a research question. Let's just say it's a research question, a thesis statement, whatever. And if you think about when you're writing a thesis, when you have your research question, which you introduce, maybe in introduction and the literature review, depending on your discipline, you've got to remember that everything you're writing, that's the purpose of your writing, isn't it? When you put the thesis statement, this is why you're writing. This is what you're investigating. And everything you write after that has to relate back to the thesis statement. Every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every section. So think to this. So you've got your thesis statement, and then look at your literature review. And then you've got, you write the first literature review, you have your first paragraph. Every paragraph should have one main idea, no more. And that main idea should relate to your research question. And then the second paragraph relates to the first paragraph with the argumentation, also expanded onto your thesis statement. So go through every paragraph and see if there's just one main idea, and see if it does it, is it relevant to my argumentation in the essay, which is the research question, and go through step by step by step and see whether there are sections you can delete. And there's nothing wrong with writing too much. As I showed the graph earlier, expert writers or professional writers delete half or even 2/3 of the text. There's nothing wrong. The delete button is your friend. Can be a bit depressing. I have deleted 2 months' work before. Just press delete, and that's what happens. But you're learning, writing to learn, learning to write. So look at it. Is the information essential, not essential? And if it's not essential, delete it. Be ruthless. And also, consult your supervisor. They should be able to help you here as well.
Okay, thank you. About writing groups, when you have a writing group, how can you be sure that the others are not going to bring you down and take ideas from you?
Okay, bring you down and take ideas
That's an
from
interesting
you.
one.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've never been asked. Actually, I've kind of been asked that. I mean, the thing about writing groups is I had a problem setting these up when, for example, on baccalaureate courses where there's just one writing task at the end. And people are very worried about plagiarism or sort of collaboration and so on here. But I mean, if you're writing your thesis, let's assume that you're writing a thesis for this so that I can answer this. If you're writing a thesis, I don't know, maybe in political science, you're all writing about a different topic. Maybe it's chemistry. I've always heard this in chemistry, actually. Okay, but anyway, you're writing about a different topic here. So I'm assuming that if you think about this, that, okay, it is competitive, but if you think about it, that you're here to help each other. You're there to support each other as a writing group. You're there to support your writing processes. You're there to support how you write with good ideas and so on, and also emotionally. And the thing is how is it going to benefit the other members of the group if they copy your writing? It's not, is it? I mean, it's not their thesis. Your thesis is your thesis. It's your own, your voice. You own it. So, and that question about stealing ideas, I think, is what you're talking about. And that's coming into the whole open a can of worms of plagiarism, isn't it?
I think it will work when there's one task for all the people.
If it's one task for all the people, then I think you have to be a bit more careful about this. And I would say that maybe for writer groups, if it's just one task, but I was thinking about this from MA thesis and BA thesis, and everyone's doing different topics. If you're doing the same task, then yeah, that could happen, and there could be an issue that people are collaborating. So be careful with this one. The second part, though, is different. Is how can you be sure that people don't bring you down? Now, here, this is what you talk about. Let's say you've got a writing group of 4 people, and let's say you're writing the introduction of your thesis. You hand it in, but let's say that John didn't hand in his introduction or had it in his introduction, and you all gave feedback to each other. Okay. But John didn't give feedback. So that's not good, you know, so he hasn't put the time in the group. We call this, so basically that in a way could, in an idea could also in some way of thinking bring you down. But on the other hand, I'd like to convince you that by giving feedback, and there's research on this, it's Lunston and Baker, I think it's 2009, did a study in America actually, on undergraduates, American undergraduates. And what they did is they had these writing groups, but they had one set of students only gave feedback to their peers, and the other control group, the other group, only received feedback from these peers. So one received feedback and one group gave feedback. It's a big study. It's an important study. And what they found, which surprised, well, it's not surprising to me. Oh God, I can't use subjective language. Sorry, I'm not using surprise in there. What they found is that the students who gave feedback improved their writing a lot more than those who received the feedback. So for bringing down, giving feedback to people will actually improve your writing a lot. It improves your diagnostic abilities, your criticality. I mean, writing is about criticality. So it won't bring you down if one of the group member doesn't participate. However, here you're also talking about a thing called peer reciprocation, is that in the group, you're all trying to work together and support each other. So if one of the team members is not working, then you can either encourage the team member to participate, or to be quite blunt, just get rid of them. If they're not going to contribute, it's not going to help. We talk about it's just going to drag the group down. So you just basically got to find people who are accountable. Make a contract at the beginning, a verbal contract that we're going to help each other, and we promise that we're going to turn up at this day. We're going to give each other feedback. Let's say spend 20 minutes or half an hour a week to give feedback, and make sure that your work, that you all agree what the rules and etiquette of your group are at the beginning. And then, and also agree at the start that if someone is not going to conform, then they should leave, to be quite blunt, because I mean, it happens, doesn't it? Does that answer the question?
I think so, yeah, it's a fair answer. Also staying on the topic of of feedback. We have a question from a supervisor, actually.
Huh.
They say, I'm a supervisor and I have the students I supervise comment on each other's texts. My observation is that they're being too nice to each other, saying great text, interesting topic, go on like this, and leave the slaughtering, in quotation marks, up to me, the supervisor. How do you think I can motivate students to provide more constructive criticism? I don't want them to be too negative, of course.
Okay. Well, actually, I give a lot of workshops and presentations just on this subject, and I can't answer this in 5 minutes, but I'll have to give the short answer here. What we do on ComSci is that, for example, the doctorate students here, and I've done it with master's students, is that we give workshops on how to give good feedback comments. Okay, so we give feedback as what is a good feedback comment, and we were talking about people who just use some praise and nice comments. Okay, so we give feedback. What is a good feedback, which tends to be a global comment, which means a comment which is talking about ideas, organized in structure, not grammar and language. The feedback comment should also it should be global. It should be targeted. It should be identifying a textual problem, for example. You should also try to justify your comment, give a reason for this comment if it's complicated. And what I also use in the training is I also get the students, before they commit their text for review, is they have to write a short, what I call the cover letter. I'm going to call it a feedback expectation letter. So basically, before the students have to submit their text, they write a short text about half a page, no more. And in this text, they have to think about their reviewers. Now here, this is like writing for an audience. Normally, like if you're writing a thesis, you're writing for your supervisor, for example, they're going to evaluate your text and this is smart. If you're going for review comments, peer review, you're talking about that your audience for the peer review comments, if you're an author, will be your peer who will be an educated reader in your subject, but not the expert. The supervisor has always got the power distance and should know much more. But what they should do is they write a short letter explaining what their text is about and ask them for targeted feedback. What are the weaknesses so they can be honest, you know? So they say, oh, I don't know. For example, my thesis statement here, it seems a little bit weak. Is it sound? Do you understand it? And so on. So there, the authors actually start and take responsibility for their text. At the same time, they're having to think about who's going to give them the reviews and their competency for giving feedback. Obviously, supervisors is going to be more. And at the same time, by writing what I call this feedback expectation letter, the authors also change their own text, because when you're doing this, you're analyzing your own text for problems. By doing this, that will also then give the feedback expectations by the reviewers. Then they have a clear idea what is expected in their feedback comments. At the same time, give a workshop about what is a good feedback comment, which is being critical about certain aspects of the text, depending on what's been taught in the workshops and the lectures. And what I think often happens as well is when students don't know how to give feedback and they haven't been trained properly, they often just say, great title, which is not helpful. It's actually detrimental. Or there are loads and loads of comments, what I call unjustified praise, great title, great paragraph, really interesting topic, and so forth. Here, I would say that consider that positive feedback comments can also be very helpful when they are justified. So if you could say that your research question is very good because it summarizes very quickly the purpose of your research and so on. If you give reasons for positive feedback, then that's very helpful to the author, because the author can then say, oh, right, I got that right. And I don't need to revise that section and waste any more time. So, I mean, here we're talking about what type of praises you're given. But I mean, often students don't give good feedback and go to unjustified praise, comments of praise, when they're just not quite sure on how to give feedback. So you need to give feedback training. That's the answer to that quickly.
Thank you.
And you can talk to me later, whoever this person, I'll be very happy to expand on that.
We have another question. My thesis subject is quite consumed already. How important is it that the BA thesis brings new information and a new perspective?
That's a good question, isn't it? I I would say, I mean, basically, if you take a look at the competencies, if you do a PhD, then you have to contribute to the knowledge of your field and come up with new information. Master's level in the UK, you don't have to have a hypothesis in some universities. So at baccalaureate level, first of all, always consult with your supervisor, which supersedes anything I might say here. That's my disclaimer. But the second thing is, for baccalaureate level, I think that it doesn't, new information. I think it's more about, I would say it's more about demonstrating that you've understood the topic, and the subject nature is more important than actually coming up with groundbreaking work which will change the world. So I would say personally, but do consult your supervisor. I wouldn't say it's so important. It's much more important that you demonstrate that you critically engage with your sources and built up a valid argument in your baccalaureate thesis.
Thank you. What do you recommend to those working full-time, also having to write their thesis?
Yeah, okay, I understand that. This happens a lot in this stuff. Yeah, well, in that case, you need to really get yourself protected time and space. As we were talking about in the webinar, try to get in. I do understand it, and I fully sympathize. That is very difficult, and especially if you've got kids as well, it makes it doubly as difficult. The thing is you've got to find a time when you can write. You need protected time and space. And this is why I would say things like shut up and write sessions would be ideal for you. Try to get in a group and try to find a time in the week. I know that you're going to be tired, aren't you? So you go to work all day, you come back at 7 o'clock at night, you're knackered, and you're not really fully focused. So you've got the weekends to think about. So I think you just have to look at your busy lifestyle and try to work out the times and spaces where you can devote times for writing. As you said, an intensive half-an-hour stage 3 times a week is better than staring at a blank piece of paper at 8 o'clock at night when you're utterly knackered for 4 hours, getting nothing done. Also try to do these come write with me. Shut up and write sessions and writing as a social app. But just somehow, when you write, protected time and space, short time, and make sure you write intensely and use that time effectively.
Thank you. A question about techniques to keep to focus. Any other method you have found yourself really useful to keep you doing the work that people often overlook because they are so simple that they appear stupid?
Is this to do with just motivation, just to find a quiet, protected space? What I do when I was doing my PhD is I'm lucky enough to have a nice little summer place up in the west coast of Estonia by the seaside. It's a place called Haapsalu, and I have a dog. And what I do is I go up there myself, and it's like a writing retreat. I write and retreat for myself, and I just go up there myself and the dog, computer, turn off the internet unless I need it for research, and take off all the distractions like the software I said before, not checking your email and news. And I just sit there and I come up with a clear plan that in 5 days, if you can get this, I write for a week, I stay there for a week, and I just write and write and write and plan and plan and plan. I have no contact really with the outside world. I'm a bit of a hermit that way, but that's what I do. Works for me, not for everyone.
Thank you. Do you have any tips on how to keep a good supervisor-supervisee relation during the thesis writing process?
That's a very good question, isn't it? I mean, personal relationships is always a tricky one here. I mean, as a supervisor, if the supervisee does not, I mean, basically they should, well, it's a difficult question to really answer. I mean, it depends whether you're seeing each other online or face to face. It depends on your interactions, how your interactions build up, because it's always that personal thing. But as a supervisee, I know that academic staff and supervisors generally are very, very busy people, and they don't like their time being wasted, but they're very happy to help students who have valid questions. So I would say that make sure that when you ask for advice, it's targeted. Make sure that you think very carefully. I talked about this idea of a cover letter. Like if you're going for peer review, you write down half a page about what your text is about and what feedback expectations are there. So when you're asking for your supervisor for advice or a setup meeting, make sure that you're organized, you're prepared. Make sure that you've thought about what is the purpose of me contacting my supervisor? What do I want to get out of this? How is this going to help me with my baccalaureate and master's thesis writing? And consider these points, you know, so that you're not wasting the time, and make it a very constructive dialogue between the supervisee and the supervisor. So it's very constructed, very professional, and very academic.
Okay. And staying on the topic of supervisor, what if the cooperation with the supervisor and student is not too good? As it feels that they are not willing to have open, creative discussions or get students' ideas and thoughts, or perhaps it's the student's problem here.
Okay, so on that question about a supervisor, supervisee, I've had that case actually. I remember my PhD actually just going, sometimes it's just unavoidable. You just don't get a supervisor, supervisee who doesn't click. I remember this poor lady when I was doing the PhD from some university in the UK, I think it was Exeter, was saying exactly the same. It's just I don't want to ask my supervisor these questions because they don't seem to be interested, and so on and so on and so on. And that's just sad. The first thing to do is if a supervisor and supervisee are not getting on, I mean, there could be a number of factors which are causing this. For example, sorry, just a second. For example, it could be something to do with personality. You just don't click as two people. It could be that there's been problems so the supervisor thinks supervisee has been wasting their time. It could be that the supervisor is just too busy. There could be this, there could be a number. It could be that the supervisor is not so competent in the field of topic, which does happen here. And it's just unfortunate. I don't know, maybe the university has a mechanism where you can change your supervisor. That may be, I mean, sometimes this is the case because it is very, very important you get good supervision. I mean, that's just unfortunate. That's about all. I can't really give much more advice on that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. What advice could you give to stop overestimating own speed of writing? Maybe the speed is the question of keeping focus narrowed on the topic. How could that be achieved? Well,
I think this question comes down to its quality rather than quantity, isn't it? So if you're talking about that, there's a question of setting unrealistic goals, I would say. If you've got your writing diary, by the end of the day, I'm going to write 5,000 words. Well, no, okay, 400 words. And it might only be 200 words. And it also depends on the level of complexity of the writing. I mean, as I've been saying throughout the webinar, the planning is very important. It is perhaps arguably the most important part of the writing process, because if you haven't got a good plan, you're probably not going to come up with a good dissertation or thesis. So a lot of this, maybe the person here is focusing too much on the actual writing itself rather than the thinking. Writing is thinking, isn't it? It's criticality, maybe thinking far too much on how much you're going to produce. Maybe they're saying like, oh, I need to produce a page of text at the end of the day. And it's not, writing's not like that really. It's more like thinking about your ideas and arguments. And maybe this person is just setting unrealistic goals and is trying to quantify the progress rather than, as we know, sometimes it's intangible, the process. You can't see. I mean, I have days where I don't get any writing done whatsoever, you know, but I do have lots of ideas. And then about a week later, I suddenly come up with a really good writing burst. And I get all my ideas and thoughts down succinctly. Does that make, okay, so that's what I said. So maybe just try to be a bit more realistic, try to take your emotional temperature a lot more, and try to be realistic. Maybe the deadline, maybe it could be that the deadline is looming a bit quicker than anticipated and you're a bit behind. So therefore you think you have to do more writing. And as I said, slow and steady wins the race rather than trying to do large amounts in one time or a large amount of writing in one space.
Okay. And also when it comes to deadlines and feedback, how to stop avoiding writing and continuing submitting papers when you fear the feedback coming afterwards and balance the expectations coming from the supervisor.
Oh, are you talking, is this a question that you submitted your paper, you're waiting for the feedback, and you're thinking, and you're still writing, and you're thinking that when the feedback comes back, then maybe the writing I've done will be redundant or no use whatsoever. Is that what the question means?
I think that, or maybe it's I think it's just usually, yeah, writing and sending feedback, and all at the same time fearing that maybe what I've written was not good enough.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, I get that question. That's a question of emotions. Okay, writing is a draft. It's just whatever draft you're at. First draft, second draft, third draft, fourth draft. Even when you submit your dissertation, it's a draft. It's not the final. You're never going to have the final polished product. That's how the way I view writing. It's a piece. It's a writing which can always be improved. Or actually, when you revise, it could get worse as well. Actually, so I mean, here you've got to think. You've got to calm. You've got to get into your inner emotions. This is to do with confidence and writing anxiety. If you go, oh, this is not very good. I don't want to show this to anyone. And this comes back to what I think I was talking about perfectionism. If you're thinking that you're going to be perfect, and writing the draft is not a perfect, that's why you're submitting to your supervisor for comments, isn't it? And I think this is the point. You've got to ask questions and go, be honest with yourself. Okay, I've submitted this. My supervisor is going to take it back, and I'm going to get feedback, comments which may be quite harsh, it might be quite upsetting. It depends on the feedback, on the supervisory feedback style. But you've got to remember that when the feedback comes back, and if it's a bit harsh, they're not attacking you as a person. They're not saying you're a horrible person because you read this. They are trying to genuinely help you improve your writing. It's there to be helpful and constructive. So when you get the feedback, you just take a deep breath and just go, okay, so that wasn't the best of feedback, but then be constructive and look at the feedback. Maybe you need to put it away for a day, 2 days, because you just can't face it. But when you get over that shock, anger, and denial, when you've accepted that, okay, that wasn't the best of work I've done, and the feedback I got my supervisor was pretty scathing, then you look at the feedback, and then you implement the feedback into your writing if you believe it. Have a look at it objectively. Look at the feedback and think, how does that supervisory comment, how is that going to improve this sections or whatever? And do I agree with these comments, and what can I do to make it better? I think the whole point is that feedback is meant to be helpful. Think of it as a positive light, even if it's negative. Think of it that it's only there to improve you.
Okay, thank you. And the last question we have here is it bad to use too many quotes or paraphrasing from the same source? And if you realize that you got stuck in the literature review part, what can you do about it? Because maybe you think too much about the end goal instead of focusing on what you can do now.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, the question is, I'm often asked in my lectures or workshops and so forth, especially, it's like, how many sources do you expect? And maybe a thesis, an essay. And I always try to answer that question by not quantifying it. I remember when I was doing my master's at Manchester University, quite some time back actually, and there's a very eminent and wise professor who was talking about the sources. It's not a question of how many sources you have. It's a question of using your sources well. It's to do with quality. As I keep going on, like that book I share, Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, about writing as a journey and writing quality. It's the quality of the sources you use, not the quantity of the sources you use. However, if you're using one source 100 times in, well, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but if you're using one source on numerous occasions in one section of writing, then it could become that it could come across as unscientific or biased because you're not balanced. This is one researchers or research teams' point of view, and you will need to have another, you will need to perhaps substantiate your claims with more than this one source. So that could be considered. I can't comment without reading the writing. that could be considered as poor research, or not poor, but it could be researched more, shall we say. And the second part of the question, which was again,
if you get stuck in the literature review part.
okay, and yeah, then you can get stuck on the literature review part. I mean, this comes back down to planning, getting stuck. And as I've been trying to say all along, if you plan well, then the writing process should go smoothly. If you don't plan thoroughly, then you can have problems further down the line. And one part of the planning process, of course, is evaluating sources. Basically, when you start writing, you should, be reading a lot, annotating, using all the tools and using the sources. As you said, we had a question earlier about how do I read a dry source? Well, you're always thinking about the sources has a purpose. The purpose of the sources you're reading is that it's helping you to learn, to think about the subject. And you're also going to have to take the information from one source and use it to substantiate your research question in your thesis. So you're using for different techniques here. So all I can say is that perhaps you need, for the literature review, maybe wider reading may be needed, maybe evaluating more sources, going to your supervisor, asking for help. For example, talking to your colleagues and asking for more help. Maybe you're a bit stuck, maybe the topic's really difficult and there's very few sources on it. I don't know. But I mean, seek help, always ask when you're stuck. Mm-hmm. That's what supervisors are for. That's where you can get help from your peers. And you shouldn't feel worried about seeking help or getting feedback when you think your writing's bad. That's why you're there. You're learning. It's not perfect. No one's perfect.
Okay, thank you. We had a person in the chat who was explaining one of their problems and would like to get to you and contact you. How can people contact you if they want to ask you questions?
Yeah, that's sure. Okay, I will give my personal email address at the moment because I'm just about to get an email address at Tartu University because I've just come back from the UK. But I will put it in the chat function.
Okay.
I will be getting a proper email address soonest, but I will just give my personal email for now. Okay, you can contact me with this email. And of course, you can also consider Judah Lajan, who was my supervisor in the PhD, who's the head of the Academic Writing Center at Tartu University. And there's also my colleague, Katerina, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. She's also helps, she does a lot on writing and emotions here. And she also runs the Shut Up and Write sessions at Tartu University. So all of these questions, be very happy to facilitate. Absolutely. Did you get my email address here? Yes.
Yes, it's
in the chat. So
yes,
do it that way. Brilliant.
Okay. Well, I think we've run out of questions here. I'm going to check again. Yes, and we're also running short of time. So I would like to thank you again, Roger, for your input and the great discussion that we've had here. And I'm sure that your advice has been really helpful to our viewers and to everyone listening to us. And I'm sure that your contribution will actually make a change in a lot of people's thesis.
Okay, and I also just like to point out for one question in the chat, I just want to clarify this anonymously. When I was talking about supervisees problems, it works both ways as well. Being a supervisor, it can be, or a teacher or a lecturer, it can be very soul destroying when you work really hard and someone, basically, the problem that students have with learning rests entirely on the lecturer or the supervisor's point of, because of certain this and that. And that's not the true either. What I was trying to say here is sometimes it's very, very complicated to, it's very, very complicated, these interpersonal relationships and so on. I mean, I don't want the blame culture here. It's just that sometimes you just don't click and sometimes it's better to change it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Roger, for your contribution and for all the great advice today. And for all of you watching, you can send Roger further questions. Or if you have any other questions regarding studies in Tartu, you can contact us at the International Student Ambassadors. Our email address is studentambassadors@ut.ee, or you can go on to our website, isa.ut.ee, to get in touch with members of ISA if you'd like to. And yeah, that's all for today. Thank you so much for your attention, and good luck everyone with your thesis writings.
Thank you, Liverl. Thank you very much for moderating this discussion, and it's been a real pleasure being here. And I've really enjoyed talking to you and answer your questions, and also good luck with your writing process.
Thank you so much. Thank you.